This is Mike Fish from Minnesota Real Estate and Management, and I'm going to talk a bit today about what I see as a crisis. And we're really facing a crisis of buyer fatigue, and there's very valid reasons for that. This morning I was going through some of my follow-ups and just looked at my list of buyers that are my long-term follow-ups. They've basically kind of fallen out, kind of given up a bit. And I want to be encouraging, but I also want to put things in perspective and help people be realistic. We have had some very reasonable sales this year representing buyers for residential homes. But none of this comes as easy as it used to. And for what it's worth, we're not going to go back to the mid 90s. You know, for example, when I bought my first house at 21 on a salary of 30,000, and it was a 4-bedroom house, we're never going to get back there. We saw, the median price in Minnesota go from, the low 200s, below the 200s to, I think we're tracking 360 now. And the truth is, there's not really a such thing as a starter home anymore. I had some sales over the last few years where I just put in perspective to see a house in Brainerd that I sold for 190,000, that buyer bought for 90,000, and that buyer bought for 45,000 in the last 10, 15 years. So let's talk about a few things to consider. And part of the buyer fatigue is interest rates. Interest rates are never going to go back to 2 to 3%. I think they are going to go down. And you could argue, well, next spring might be better, or the year after that might be better. The truth is, interest rates are still way lower than they were in the 70s and 80s. And as we say, you kind of marry the property and date the rate. You are better off, and this is my true personal opinion, you're better off buying as a buyer with a higher interest rate, because there's a pie, and that pie really doesn't change. It's a matter of how much is the bank going to take, how much are the sellers going to get. And when interest rates are low, prices go up, and you're much better off buying at a higher interest rate that you can afford, that you can get away with, and maybe you're saving 50,000 or 100,000 on the sale of the property because you are in a tougher market with higher interest rates, and then you refi in a year or two. Whereas if you wait till those interest rates go down and you're in multiple offers and you see those prices go up and it's a hot market, you're going to pay more for the house, and that doesn't necessarily help you a whole lot in your bottom line, right? And so we're facing an inventory crisis. This is all supply and demand. That inventory crisis is a big issue. It's not something that's going to get solved anytime soon with the building costs. And with so many people locked in at these crazy low interest rates, 2 to 3%, they're not selling because they're not selling because they're not going to sell to buy to triple their interest rate. So we've got to be realistic about that issue. We've got very low inventory propping up the prices, even though it's tougher on buyers, right? And then we're coupled up with the rising taxes and the rising insurance. So the idea of a cheap starter home is kind of gone. I always say, I used to say it was tough to find something livable for under 150. Now I would say pretty tough to find anything livable for under 250. We pulled off a few deals, but a buyer does have to be realistic about that there's the inventory of what we would call starter homes is much less and much more difficult to find. So the reality of the situation really comes down to this. I feel like to this day, 80 to 90% of buyers are looking for a move-in ready home, right? And they've got their location in place, in mind. And I will say this, that I think a buyer needs to be more open to basically negotiate their ideals than they used to be. They have to be open to a house that's not perfect, because the reality is finding a house that's not perfect is is the reality. If you're looking for something that is what most people can afford as their first home or their second home, they say the average buyer right now I think is over 40, almost 45 years old, and that says something about the market. The other thing I'd mention is this, and I think this is a key factor that a lot of people got caught off guard over the last several years on. If at all possible, you want to go with a bank that can get you a conventional loan, even if you don't have the 10 to 20% down. There's some conventionals now that are down to 3%. You don't want to get caught off guard with the FHA regulations. Basically, that worked 15 years ago for FHA to say, hey, this house has to be in perfect condition, right? Because you could find a house in perfect condition at what most people consider a reasonable price. Now, if you're looking in that range that many people are in a starter home, you are not going to find a house necessarily that's going to pass some of the FHA regulations on the back end. So it's really important that you're working with a right loan officer, an aggressive loan officer that has multiple products. I think that it's very important that you're willing to work with an aggressive agent that will get in right away within hours if the right place shows up, but also willing to slow down on one that may have issues and kind of work through those issues. It's a little bit more of a journey than it used to be. But I do want to encourage you, here's the reality of it. For all the negativity that people have, about the real estate market right now, the number of homes sold in Minnesota rose very slightly by about 1% between 25 and 24 based off what we're tracking, and rose about 1% between 24 and 23. So I know that from a distance the real estate industry is a little bit slower, but I want to really encourage buyers that the market is still there. It just takes a little bit more time sometimes, a little bit more diligence. I always say I never pressure anybody. Sometimes you got to look at 10 to 15 homes before you find the right one. We got to work a little bit harder than we used to. But I will tell you, it's much better than it was 5 years ago when 6 years ago when things went crazy, and I had buyers that literally, we looked at 20 to 25 homes, put in 4, 5, 6 offers, and lost every offer because of multiple offers. So the market is much more balanced than it used to be. And aside from the interest rates, the market is much more reasonable for buyers now that are realistic about it than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. I feel like we have a little bit of breathing room right now. We don't know what next spring is going to hold. If the interest rates do go down again, next spring may be crazy again. We don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do want to encourage buyers that are kind of on that fence. Should we try again? If you feel like you got knocked off your horse 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, my short answer is yeah, I think it's worth trying right now. I've had several closings on the buyer side in the last few months that went very well. So again, some of those we had to look at a few more houses, and my buyers had to be open to a few more issues. But the market is still there. So again, this is Mike Fish with Minnesota Real Estate Management. Hopefully I'm not discouraging you. I want to encourage you. I hope to earn your trust in business through honest conversations like this. And depending on where you're seeing this, please like the video, subscribe, stay in touch. We would love to earn your business.